Hello, hello. Today we're gonna talk about climate in another country because a week ago I did a video about climate in India, but now I want to talk about a country with a second largest population in the world, and that is not India, not US, but China. China is actually a very large country with a very diverse climate. We have a lot of large cities, small, some big, and they all have a slightly different climate. It's actually a very large country that is affected by many different weather systems, but what I want to talk about today and what I want to point out is how an Eastern Asia monsoon affects China, because we all know from a previous video, but at least the one, if you watch this video, you know what a monsoon is, but if someone don't know, it's a system of winds that is reversing throughout the year. So for example, in July, the wind tend to blow in an opposite way than in January, for example. And this is actually what happens to every nation in Eastern Asia, including China. And as we said in a previous video with India, the monsoon affects basically everything related to the weather in this country. With China, it will be slightly different, because China, as if you remember the world map by heart, you know that China is higher, we can say, from India, which means it's in a higher latitude, and therefore it will have cooler climate, more similar to climate you will find in the US or in Western Europe, for example. So a lot of places there will experience the typical weather. So the whole year could be divided into 4 seasons in a typical way, as it is divided commonly in the temperate parts of the world, not like in India, which tends to have more equatorial or tropical climate. But it doesn't mean, obviously, that China isn't affected by the same weather systems as India, because we have a very large continent that gets very cool in the winter, surrounded by relatively warm oceans, and even warm currents. So lines, streams of hot water that travels from the equator toward the poles and makes the Eastern Asian coast warmer than it should be just by looking at its latitude. And therefore, we need to think of China as a country that has the similar wind and rain pattern. The coast, that is the part of the country where most people live, will be affected in a summer by hot and wet conditions, and in a winter by dry and cool conditions. And what's even more interesting is that the western part of the country, so the part closest to the center of an Asian continent, will be very dry, because we're at the center of the continent and wet air masses aren't common there at all. Therefore, it is actually part of the country that is almost empty, but people who live there definitely know how it can be cold, but also primarily very dry for throughout the year. We obviously also have climate found on the high altitudes, so a mountainous climate. We have some parts that experience almost no winter, and this will be the southern parts of the China. They experience the monsoon, but they will experience a cold but rather cool winter, not a snowy cold winter as in the central United States, let's say. And we will have the part that is on the northern side of the country that will have a cooler winters with snow even occurring there. What also differentiates the climate of more southern Eastern Asia countries from China is that it's actually affected by a slightly different weather systems. So we will not have, strictly speaking, an Indian monsoon or a monsoon that affects India region, but rather Eastern Asia monsoon. And it is slightly different. It brings different air masses. It isn't related at all to equatorial air mass, so the mass that brings the temperature above 30 degrees along with a cloudy sky and frequent rain. We will rather have a tropical air mass that is found, for example, in the Gulf of Mexico, but also in places like Azores and surrounding areas. And it's an air mass that brings afternoon thunderstorms and relatively warm temperature, but it's different from what we will find in an equatorial and semi-equatorial regions. And that's how China differs from India. As we started talking in a previous video, I will make a whole video about it, solely focused on what I'm about to say. But we need to know types of climate, so not only what affects the climate there, but also what climate type occurs here. And actually, in 1903, a very clever guy called Köppen, it was his surname, found a way of dividing Earth climate into few categories. And they may be confusing, but when you think about it, it's pretty obvious. Because we have tropical climate called A. It is a climate that never experiences frost or temperature below zero. B climate, so a climate that is dry, there is not a lot of rain falling. C climate, that is a climate that is actually defined by but nothing others, but that it's not too warm and not too cold. Something in between. Most of us live in this climate type, and we have a D climate. So climate with severe and long-lasting winters, with snow commonly occurring. And all of these four types of climate actually occur in China. So we can say it's not only large, but also a country that is very diverse when it comes to climate. And actually, the climate changes really quickly because for example, the most southern parts will have the tropical climates. When we go higher in latitude along the coast, we will find more cooler climate. So C-type climate. A B climate is reserved to the western part of the country, so the parts farther away from coasts. And if we go higher, in latitude, obviously, we will finally find the D-type climate. So a very cold climate with long-lasting and snowy winters. And I think that was actually shorter than I thought. I thought it will be as long, my video will be as long as my video about India, but I believe it was enough. I don't think I have to tell something more. So all I want to say is have a nice day. Bye bye.